My 20 years in Nigeria are certainly the best years of my life. And nothing I've done since has ever equalled that.
A small plot of English earth is John Smith's patch today. At age 23, he cultivated 1,000 square miles of the British Empire.
Occasionally, the sort of enormity of it hit me, particularly when I was riding away in the morning with an escort of 30 or 40 horsemen. I felt, yes, this was what it was like when a baron set off to see his king or something.
Now he's going back to see independent Nigeria at 50.
I did put out his Panama hat, but he says he's not taking that. He's taking his trilby. So. Suits your age.
Suits my age, yes.
The BBC is reuniting him with one of the Nigerians he trained to take over from the British after independence. In a remarkable relationship, John Smith and Suleiman Baffa have remained friends for half a century. Now they're going on a journey together to find out what the empire accomplished.
How far has the African progressed? Before they came in contact with the Europeans, most of the West African tribes had made less progress in the arts of civilization than almost any other people that has lived for any length of time on this planet.
Even the BBC had its prejudices in 1958. But it admitted that in northern Nigeria there was certainly civilization, a set of old, well-organised Muslim states.
Although an international polo player who has travelled widely, the Emir speaks no English. He greets his British officials in Hausa.
British authority over the ruling emirs had been established back in 1903, more to keep out the French than to acquire any natural resources. But colonial officers learnt the emir's language and let them run most of their internal affairs, with a little polite guidance.
Do we still get camel caravans coming in or not?
Yes, there's a lot coming from Niger.
Right.
Britain created Nigeria, but ruled the south, economically more profitable, but also better educated and more restive, with a heavier hand. In the vast but quieter north, where John was among just a handful of colonial officers, indirect rule was a better option.
The British in my time were as civil as anybody could be. Now, the common man didn't feel any different from what it was before. So the British were really not so much visible, if I may call it visible. I cannot remember before I met him how many British people I had met in my life at that time.
Suleiman grew up in the countryside, little changed even today, that John was sent out to inspect just days after he arrived.
Here we are in very typical countryside. The rain just come. Sandaiki. And Lafia Babu Gajia. And the only difference is he's not dressed as he would have been in 1950, because he's wearing shirt and trousers, and then he would have been in a benti, a loincloth.
And that's all?
And that's all, yes. This is the sort of path I would have been travelling on from village to village, day by day, mounted on a horse. I'd have been accompanied by a good many other horsemen, probably as many as 20 sometimes, or 30 in prosperous Kano. It was firm policy of the administration that cadets like myself should only use horses. And if we tried to buy a car of our own, I think we might well have found ourselves dismissed.
He asked questions about every aspect of life, took notes, prepared recommendations, but his power was limited.
We were essentially, if you like, flying the flag, and my little Union Jack would be hoisted over the hut I stayed in the evening, the Zauri. The canvas bath would have been somewhere there, and people would have brought water for my bath, and my cook steward would have heated the water in a kerosene tin.
It was an exciting life, but far removed from that of the district officer of popular imagination. No cocktails at sunset for plain Mr. Smith.
I used to be able to afford a bottle of whiskey a month, and I span it out for as long as I could.
A soda siphon?
No. I had one, but I never took it on tour.
Some of the last colonial servants, like him, were of a new breed. John was educated at a state, not a private school, and he knew that his role was to decolonise, to prepare villagers in the remotest of places to become citizens of a new state. But as night fell, to the uncertain light of a tilly lamp, they could relax.
And I get out my old windy gramophone and play a few records, some for myself. I used to alternate between what I had in the way of music and what they enjoyed. So they might have eine kleine Nacht music, and then followed by the Laughing Policeman, which was always very successful,
isn't it?
Yes.
He's too kind for a policeman, he's never known to frown, and everybody says he is the happiest man in town.
It was really very lonely, a very lonely life, because most of the time I was on my own without anybody who spoke English.
Elsewhere in Nigeria, district officers had better opportunities for R&R. But the 1950s were an Indian summer for colonialism. Already, a new native elite was hungry for power.
In the capitals of any West Coast colony, you may meet many Africans whose intelligence and ability is equal or superior to our own. I asked Mrs. Moore, whom I met at a dinner party, whether she looked forward to the British leaving.
Well, I would say I'm looking forward to it, but I don't know that they will ever leave completely. We shall be employing the British, whereas before the British employed us.
It's a very touching moment as the Union Jack is brought down in darkness and the Nigerian flag is gradually taking its place.
On the 1st of October 1960, independence finally dawned for the largest and potentially richest of all Britain's former African possessions.
Just like we left it. And with the new addition, Department of Public Administration.
But John Smith stayed on. His mission now, to help Nigerians build their own civil service.
Of course, the trees have grown so much.
They've got old, like me.
Yeah.
His raw material was men like Suleiman Baffa, a former primary school head whose potential he spotted on a soccer pitch. Suleiman was captaining the local team when John visited his town to organise an election.
We thought we'd challenge Hadejah to a game of football, and we didn't think we'd be up against very much, but they turned out to be the sort of Manchester United of Nigeria of the time. They were beautifully turned out. That's what impressed me. They all had the same shirts and shorts and socks and boots and things, and we were very scruffy, and they beat us hollow.
Surely.
That chance threw us together for the rest of our lives.
Suleiman went on to enjoy a high-flying career in administration and banking.
Yes, I do remember our classroom was there.
His last job was running the Nigerian Mint.
I never thought there was any record existing in this thing,
yes.
Especially in also in the film.
Inspiring confidence in my students was one of my main objectives.
John captured it all on his first cine camera.
And they were worked hard. And I tried to make it fun.
You're proud of that?
Yes, but I tried to make it fun. I think we all worked pretty hard.
Scrabble was one essential skill. So too was driving, with John sitting nervously in the passenger seat. Suleiman hasn't seen this before.
The first time you have to do it is really very frightening and very scary. And so the first time you put the gear on and you push on the throttle, the car, for many of us, or most of us, you will find it like the car just stops. And because you fear that you might really annoy even the car to knock you out.
Here in the centre, we have the district head's house.
But in role-play sessions at John's College, filmed by the BBC in 1958, the most important lesson was in integrity. Public servants should seek no personal advantage for themselves or for anyone else.
Mr. Chairman, as a member of this committee, and since my brother has the necessary qualifications, I feel he should be appointed as one of the central inspectors.
I'm sorry, Mr. Rajbanla, this is not an appointment committee.
This was one of John's colleagues.
I must interrupt there. If your member is becoming very awkward like that, you must draw his attention to standing orders, which are the rules of debate.
Whatever we learned it in the tradition of the British officers. And that is in the sense that you have to do everything consciously, believing that you are doing the right thing. If in any way you thought it was not right, then don't do it.
But for Nigeria, the lesson didn't stick. Today's students were born into a country that had become a byword for corruption.
The civil service expanded very, very tremendously immediately after the states were created. So a lot more people had to be employed and so forth. And all those were new people. And these new people were fresh, many of them and so forth. So certainly there was going to be some kind of dilution.
Of quality?
Of quality, definitely.
What proportion of the civil service would you think was honest today?
There's a lot of hush-hush.
Hush-hush?
Yes. What does that mean?
Yes.
Wishy-washy.
Wishy-washy?
Yes. That is dealing that is not proper.
Oil was the first curse. Discovered under the British, its vast revenues could have made the proud new state the most powerful in Africa. Instead, the wealth fueled both corruption and violence. Soon, the artificial state that colonialism had created from nearly 300 different peoples was on the verge of breakup.
I think the frontiers were the big problem because we put into Nigeria peoples of far greater diversity than we have in Europe.
For more than 18 months, Nigeria and the breakaway region of Biafra have been at war.
The first of many coups, just 6 years into independence, sparked civil war. An estimated 3 million people died, mainly of hunger and disease, as Biafra fought and lost its struggle for secession. The first humanitarian disaster in Africa that captured the pity of a global television audience. Nigeria stayed together, but as a military-run kleptocracy. About $400 billion was stolen from national coffers in its first 4 decades. Could all that have been avoided if the proud old Emirate of Kano had not been forced to submit to the authority of His Britannic Majesty King Edward VII? In the grand sweep of African history, European colonial rule was a mere blip, Here, it lasted less than a single lifetime. For better or for worse, the colonial powers defined Africa's internal borders. They set its official languages. But beyond that, it's hard to know whether they did too much or too little. How far are they really to blame for the chaos that engulfed Nigeria and other places within just a few years of their departure? Remarkably, it was all foreseen back in 1958 by my bare-kneed predecessor at the BBC, Aidan Crawley.
By supporting the authority of chiefs, we have strengthened feudal and autocratic rule in almost all forms of local government. On the other hand, by introducing the adult suffrage and the parliamentary system, we've set in motion an exactly contrary process. Now, can we really expect the Africans, without our help, to resolve this contradiction by liberal and democratic means?
There is a problem with colonial government, that when it starts, the colonial governor is not a Queen Elizabeth II, he is a King Henry VIII. And you have to make that transit, which took Britain several centuries, in a matter of 60 years in Nigeria. And so obviously colonial government in a way is not a good preparation for democracy, and I think that may be one reason why military governments have played a role.
Okay, good morning. He told you my name is Suleiman Baffa. I was here teaching for about 3 years, from 1959 to 61.
Realising late in the day that it should help prepare for democracy, the empire in northern Nigeria tried to promote education. This is the school that Suleiman was running when John first met him.
He came as a trainer of DOs.
In the time of their grandfathers, Britain and Nigeria had almost the same population. Now Nigeria's is more than twice as big as Britain's. The head count here has gone from 100 day pupils to 3,000 boarders.
This is the student hostel.
By local standards, they're well looked after, and it's all free.
We have a locate.
Yeah.
Yes, we can check the body, the nails.
So how well is Nigeria doing today? Corruption has declined a bit, and the economy has improved since military rule ended in 1999. But in real terms, per capita national income is still lower than at independence in 1960.
Nails.
More than half of Nigeria's people live on less than $1 a day, and no one can rely on regular electricity or water supplies.
There are those that has
With breathtaking political incorrectness, Suleiman's successor as head wishes that the British had never left.
You'd like the British to come back?
Oh yes, if they can come back.
In what role?
In the role of the economic, political, etc.
To rule the country again?
Yes, rule the country again.
Well, so that Nigeria wouldn't be independent anymore?
No. But they can come back in terms of the legacy and the policies.
And there was a tennis court somewhere here. I can't remember quite where. I think it may have been a bit farther along there. Yes, the tennis court has gone.
Just beyond the school, you can see how Britain's legacy has crumbled. This was a government lodge where John once stayed.
It's not quite as romantic as looking at a Roman ruin in Britain, I might say. But then we weren't here as long as the Romans were, and we weren't such good builders anyway. I think in the lifetime of a whole nation, 60 years is a very short period. It's a raindrop in a thunderstorm. It was a bit like going around the country with a feather duster.
Though John changed Suleiman's life forever.
I think if there's any word better than mentor.
Mentor?
Yes. What I mean by that is someone who I take as, who could have given me guidance, has taken me in very good confidence, and has believed in my ability to do things, and has really guided me to get it.
They've met at intervals throughout their 50 years of friendship, but no longer young. They may now be parting for the last time. Before he leaves, John wants one last look at Kano, where he arrived in 1951, at the country he came to think of as his own.
I suppose I would have, in a way, expected more. We were all superbly optimistic, perhaps, in 1960 as to what could be achieved. But then the country has got huge problems. It's got a massively growing population. More than half is below the age of 20 or so.
Today's children are taught that colonialism was a crime. And of course, Europeans had no right to rule here. But was the mistake in the end to do too much or too little?
I don't think empire was acquired in Britain with great enthusiasms. And our role was essentially to make sure that Nigeria could join the wider world of which it was part, which we tried to do with minimal resources.
To have come as a colonizer and left as a friend is no mean achievement. But how would Africa have been had John Smith and his kind never come in the first place? That's one of the tantalising ifs of history.